This is Simon Richmond from Palmskin Productions, and you're listening to the Liverpool Connection Podcast, music and football episodes.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Liverpool Connection Podcast. This is my football and music and more episode where I bring on a guest to talk about music, football and life in general. My next guest is a DJ producer and has put out so many amazing albums. You have, mate. He's one of the first to be signed to Mowax, James Lavelle's label. He goes by Simon, but people all know him better as Palmskin Productions. We have just had such an amazing conversation before I press record on Mixer. Welcome. I can officially welcome you to the podcast now.
Thanks. It's going to be a disappointment now. It's all downhill after that chat.
No, mate. Definitely not. Well, I'm going to get straight into it, Simon, because about your musical background first. And I know you're not a footy supporter.
I was going to say the football element. I mean, I'm interested in football, and we can get to that, but from a kind of different angle. But we'll leave that for now.
Yeah. Your musical background, your roots in music. Did your parents have any influence on your musical upbringing?
Yeah, they did. I think one of the main things. My father's not with us anymore. My mother, who's 93 and acts like a 70-year-old, still is, and is still very, very into music. But my father, in particular, was an obsessive, detailed listener of music. It was mostly classical. In fact, anything past the kind of Baroque period he wasn't particularly into. So really a part of Mozart maybe, and the Beatles. He adored the Beatles. But if he was listening to music, or if we were listening to music as a family, whether it was in the car or at home, you absolutely couldn't speak. There couldn't be a conversation going on. There couldn't be anything else really going on. And half the time he would do this thing of going, wait, there's a bit, and there'd be this, and it was kind of a little bit oppressive in a family environment, but it did get me listening really, really intently from a very early age. And I think from that point on, I've always been very aware of the sound of things as much as the musicality of them, and I think that came from paying attention and from listening. And then my mum had a kind of slightly different background. She had grown up in the kind of jazz. Not grown up, but she was her first husband was a photographer for Melody Maker in the 50s and 60s. So she would hang out with whoever the jazzers who were in town. And adored jazz, and I first heard things like Dizzy Gillespie, Stan Getz, stuff like that through my mum. So I suppose in that regard, there's a kind of an attention to music, I suppose I got from them. Not so much the kind of the music I would get into and the path I was set on. I had my sister's 7 years older than me, and through her I got a fast track to Talking Heads, David Bowie, Ian Dury, which I, cut out. It saved me a lot of time because I got that 7 years ahead of time kind of thing, which those three aren't a bad foundation for any kind of music, really, I think.
Well, do you think because I remember in my house, I heard classical and I was like, oh, horrible. But as I get older, I really respect it more, and you kind of tune in to you hear different melodies, from classical. And for you as well, do you think it grew on you? Because obviously you said your dad would be like, whoa, everybody kind of shut up. There's a big part coming.
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't I wasn't against it. If anything, I think as I've grown older and older, certainly for a huge chunk, my obsession was with rhythm, and as a music maker, and the absence of fixed tempo in classical music can be a real turn-off if you're looking for a nod factor. What it does give you is an enormous emotional breadth and this incredible harmonic range to enable to breathe and to speed up and slow down and have a pause, which you don't get in a banging techno tune. That's got its own emotional elements. But so actually, no, I wasn't against it, and I was probably too much of a people pleaser and a kind of a good kid to have rebelled against that. But I probably, yeah. I mean, my daughter is actually probably more open to listening to stuff like classical music now than I am, probably. I mean, when I'm playing something new I'm making, she calls it bleeps and bloops, and occasionally she'll like begrudgingly say, yeah, I think that's okay, but she doesn't. She's more into melody and more into harmony than she is into rhythm. So I guess that's, I didn't hate it, but it didn't grab me, but it provided me, I think, with a huge awareness of harmonic richness that you don't get from pop music, or you don't get from stuff that's more what I would have heard coming out the radio.
Well,
actually, I've just remembered my brother, who was 10 years older than me. He was really into electronics. He'd build shortwave radios and build odd things, and he was really into Wendy Carlos switched on Bach, which was really early synthesized stuff. And he used to, I was allowed into his room, which was this jungle of wires and manuals, and he's also a trained obsessive, so there'd be British Rail timetables everywhere, and it was like you couldn't see the floor. And he got on very, very badly with my parents, but I was allowed in his room, and he had these enormous headphones, and he'd play a high-end Sony tape machine, and he used to play me things like Switched on Bach and Monty Python tapes, and Beatles as well. He loved the Beatles too. So I think I was getting a lot of input, I suppose.
In school, did you play an instrument?
Yeah, I played piano. I started getting piano lessons and did the usual going through the grades to grade 6 piano. And I did a bit of cello for a little while, and then kind of we went through fairly hard economic times at a certain point, and my dad kind of said, can't really afford to give you piano lessons anymore. Is it like, and this was a kind of, kind of said, like, if you're really, really interested in kind of developing as a classical player, we might be able to find, and I said, look, I'm not, Dad, I'm not interested in that. And I knew from an early age that I didn't think I'm ever going to be like a virtuoso concert player, nothing close to that. And there will always be people who will play other people's music better than I can. And for instance, my grade 6 sight reading, I got 0 out of 21 with a mark saying a masterpiece of invention, which is when, you're given a piece of music and you have to read it from, no preparation. But what I did know was, I think I can probably make my music better than anyone else can. And so, so I had some degree of training. But then, I can't remember how old I would have been, probably 13 or something. I guess that I'm trying to do the years. Yeah, something around then. And then I didn't have any more lessons from then. And annoyingly, my school, so if you were relatively bright, they made you do certain O levels early. So I did maths and English and French early. And then because of that, when you then got to do the rest of your O levels, which gives my age away as well, it was O levels, not GCSEs. They made you do things like additional maths and additional whatever it was. And so I wasn't allowed to do music O level. And because I didn't do music O level, they didn't let me do music A level, which was a huge thing, really. It could have been a massive resource for me that I didn't have, which is, I hold that against my school. It's a grudge.
Yeah, well, that just sounds cruel.
Well, the general. I mean, again, as you'll know, the schooling in England in the end of the 70s and the mid 80s, I think cruel is a kind of fairly good umbrella term for a lot of it.
Oh yeah. Oh,
And I went to I didn't go to a tough school by any means,
yeah. I had to sometimes fight my way just to get to school.
Right.
Because there was an opposing school bus stop
Yeah. Yeah.
by my school, and nearly every day, always fights, just back and forth, just for the hell of it.
Well, of course, it'd be rude not to.
Yeah, it'd be rude not to go across the street and smack the guy because he's going to do it to you. So yeah, it's one of those. Yeah, for me, I really didn't have much of a musical program at my school. It was more sport.
Right.
They pushed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really, I know a lot of schools now have, music departments. I think it's great.
And music technology departments, all that, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, my school, I was really short until I hit about 15, 16. I still am super short-sighted, stick thin, geeky guy. It's never going to be sports led in any way, it just wasn't going to happen, and much as I still do love swimming and stuff like that, but when it came to team games, no.
I think I can only remember like we had like recorders. That's
Yeah.
it. Like a band of 20 recorders, like the worst nightmare ever.
I know, box of percussion and some recorders.
Yeah, they're just terrible. So after school, I mean, for me, I went on the youth training scheme to learn a trade. For
Yeah.
you, did you go to uni?
Yeah, I did. In fact, I went to Oxford, in fact. And and studied English, which has done me no good whatsoever ever since. But it was an amazing privilege, and I was probably the last of my generation to be able to get a full grant. So I didn't leave college with crippling debts, and it was an odd experience, but it was very much, I think the most I got out of it was probably the music and getting into bands and getting into DJs, into DJing and stuff like that. It was with hindsight, it wasn't necessarily the right place for me to have gone to, but there are worse ways to spend your time than 3 years in a beautiful city being paid by the state to read and talk about it,
Yeah, I mean, my missus has sent me back pictures, and it looks absolutely beautiful. I mean, she's just in like dreamland, because she's seen buildings like that before, and then obviously the museum, the library. She's just like,
Well, exactly. The first time I walked into the Bodleian to read, and I opened a book and I looked up, and it was just like, for a good half hour of just like, oh, this is incredible, and unfortunately, it's in my experience it seemed to be full of not particularly clever rich people who'd been pushed through retesting until they got the right results so that they could get a degree to get a job in the civil service or work for a oil company or a diplomatic corps or whatever it was. And I thought it was going to be, a hotbed of discussion and interest and politics. And maybe I was just unlucky and I had a chip on my shoulder. I don't know, but it didn't seem that way. But the place was stunning.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit, like Eton.
Right. Yeah.
Just like naff posh gits.
Yeah,
that's how I imagine Oxford and Cambridge. Just because, like, I mean, growing up, like especially Liverpool, there was no rowing team. Like I've never heard about that in my entire life. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, those are posh gits. Nobody rows. Like the only time you did was there was a botanical garden. Where you get with your girlfriend or boyfriend.
On the lake.
On the lake. So, to watch these like posh people like go down, and I was like, it's a race? Like what? Nah, I'm not having that. Yeah,
totally.
It was just something out of my realm, So it
was it was odd. I mean, I'm just thinking actually in terms of musical influences. What was probably more influential is for the first 2 years, I was going out with a girl who was at Bristol University, and I used to spend most of my weeks and weekends in Bristol, and I'd go and read in Bristol Library, in her uni library if I need to. And of course, the music scene in Bristol, this was like 87 to 90, was just fantastic. So that was brilliant. So I suppose I had a kind of a sneaky Bristolian kind of intro to music as well.
Well, that I mean, at that time, that was the mecca for music.
Yeah.
Otis had Massive Attack.
Yeah, the Wild Bunch. It was that was like, yeah, that was. I mean, God, the getting the 12-inch. There were two of them: the Walk On By and the Look of Love. The Smith and Mighty 12s from the Three Stripe Records, which was part of the Wild Bunch kind of collective. That they were mind blowing. They were just incredible.
So, what came first for you, DJing or producing?
Music, making music, writing music, making songs. I was in a band at school. And funny enough, I was talking about this with someone the other day. I just can't believe. So I think our first gig outside of school was Hammersmith Tube Station used to have, in the middle of Hammersmith Broadway there was a place called the Clarendon, and the Clarendon Ballroom, and it used to have, it's a decent venue, and the downstairs, the basement, was mainly kind of psychobilly stuff. So the Guana Bats and King Kurt and the Mekons used to play that, and our school band that was called Southern Comfort had a gig there, and we turned up and they double booked us with a Scottish punk band that had driven all the way from Glasgow to Hammersmith to do the gig. And I don't know if they just saw this bunch of 14, 15-year-olds and just took pity, but somewhere along the way they said, listen, you do the gig. And so we got to support, I can't remember who it was, it might have been the Guana Bats, I'm not sure, but we weren't a psychobilly band at all. I don't even really know what we were. We did a cover of the theme from Space 1999 for a start. Which was mostly just turning on as many effects pedals as you can and just hitting things.
It's got to be a recording of that somewhere.
Do you know what I have? I found a cassette of a school band night. And there's an interesting, because at my school, so the year below me was Jake from the Herbalizer, Dan Carey, who was he wasn't in the Herbalizer. He was in a band called Push Me Pull You, but he's been producing Wet Leg. He was producing Kylie. He's produced. I mean, he's like, he's horribly successful, disgustingly successful. But they would have been. I'm not sure they were playing that particular band's night. But yeah. And I found a cassette. I haven't attempted to play it, but
You're scared to play it.
Blackmail material, yeah, and I've got various cassette players, so I can play it, but I choose not to.
Well, obviously, you moved on to like K Creative on Peterson's label. Was that like your first like big eye opening to the music industry?
Yeah, I that's a good point. I suppose it was. I mean, I'd done a few little things. So another person that I met at college who was a massive massive importance to me was Tony Wachaku from Attica Blues and various other amazing projects. And he was at Oxford Poly while I was at the uni, and him and his friend used to run a night that I would play percussion at. I mean, talk about, I'm sorry, but these days, if I get a DJ gig and somebody tells me there's a percussionist there, at a certain point, I have to text the promoter and say, listen, I don't want to sound like a wanker, but can the percussionist not play while I'm doing my set? Because I would rather, shoot myself in the head. But I was that guy. And Tony had a couple of fledgling 12s. He had a thing called T Plays It Cool. And then I also met quite an unhinged guy who was a psychology professor at Oxford who had put out a couple of 12s, and I dabbled in programming and stuff, but being in getting asked to be in K Creative was the first time being on a kind of signed thing. But K Creative was a hub of 4 people, and then myself and Chris Bowden were like, we weren't part of the deal, but we were like the kind of permanent session players, if you like. So it was great as a kind of learning experience, because I had nothing to lose because I wasn't part of it, but I had everything to gain in terms of learning. Wow, okay, that's what a label does, is it? Okay, that's interesting. It was mostly not good, as labels generally tend to be. But yeah, that was a really funny, fast time of everything happening. Because obviously I was thinking about, I knew you were going to ask about, always people ask about the past, of course. And I was thinking about just those random moments where, like, the reason I got asked to be in the K Creative was because all of like 2 weeks before, I'd been at a club called the Fez that Patrick Forge and Kev Beadle did. And I was with my ex, who was the girlfriend from Bristol, and we were dancing away, and I said, I'd really like to play percussion in this club. I just don't know what to do. And she said, well, just go talk to the DJ. What's the worst that's going to happen? I was like, oh, no, I can't. And she said, oh, go on. And I went over to Patrick, who was DJing, and said, listen, I'd love to play percussion, whatever. And Patrick said, look, who was working in Reckless Records at the time, said, just come talk to me next week. I'm in the record shop. Clearly just being polite and wanting to say, can you fuck off? I'm mixing now. Why would I want to talk to you about percussion? I'm playing Afro-Cuban music. Does it really need another conga player on top of it? Clearly not. But when you're young, you don't really tune into those nuances. And I went to Reckless Records that week, and it was incredible. I mean, really, it's down to Patrick Forge that I've kind of had a career in music, because he said, we chatted, and he said, oh, you're a percussionist. Oh, okay. Well, my friend Giles has got a band and they're looking for a percussionist. Are you interested? And I said, yeah. And he also said, oh, and I'm doing a remix for a guy called Vinx. Are you interested? And I said, yeah. And out of that, I literally turned up at a rehearsal studio in Greenwich with K Creative, and it wasn't even an audition. It was just like, again, that kind of bands not really being able to make a decision. They were like, oh, well, we've got a percussionist here now. He seems all right. You're in, kind of thing. Yeah, and that was it.
Well, isn't there a story that you got sacked because they wanted...
Yeah. Have I really bitched about it to so many people that you know this?
Yeah, I've heard it through the grapevine. I'm just going, you got sacked because the band needed more lighting.
I think, yeah, that's the short version, and there isn't much more to it, really. It was just, and again, I think it's one of those things where it was probably a managerial decision, because we were all mates, and in fact, I was on holiday with 2 of them in the Canary Islands, having a cheap lads' holiday, and got back, and one of the managers said, "Can we hook up?" And said, "Listen, the next tour that's happening, we need to spend the money on lights." And so, and I was bereft. Obviously, nobody likes to be rejected. But actually, what was interesting was, about a matter of a month before, again, from hanging out in a record shop, James had said to me, because James Lavelle was working in Honest John's at the time, which was 10 minutes from where I lived, and I used to just go and hang out there all the time. And we talked about, possibility of doing stuff on Mo Wax. And at the point that they sacked me, I knew that I had my first 12 coming out. And so it was kind of one of those, yeah, okay, that's all right. And in fact, it was fantastic, because I didn't, I wasn't spending my time playing percussion for someone else, and I started, doing it for myself. And it was by doing those years of K Creative that I'd gotten money together to buy a sampler and to buy a computer, and to start, doing all the stuff that meant that I could form Palmskin Productions.
What was your first studio setup?
What was the first setup, did you say?
Yeah.
Well, it depends how pedantic you want to be. My very first studio setup was when I was probably about 11. and I had one of those little cassette players, the long ones, which the thing flips up, and you slide it in, and the speakers are along the flat bit. And I used to make instruments out of filling bottles of different types of water and hitting other things and stringing elastic bands across the piano in the house, and I just loved sounds, and I used to record that and do the old 2-tape machines thing so that you could multi-track effectively, and then I'd cut tapes and use sellotape, which is the worst thing in the world to use, instead of splicing tape. So I suppose that was my first studio setup, but my first actual making the music that would end up as a release, was an old Atari ST 140 computer, which we all had, and a Tascam 4-track cassette machine, and a sampler, and I think that was it. Did I have and maybe a little echo box, I think, and that was it. And then I just started. I guess around the K Creative time was when I started. It gave me the money to start buying synths, and my approach to buying synths for a while was a bit like your approach to buying shoes. And I have a lot of broken synths in my studio attic as a testament to that. But yeah, the first setup was a small computer and a 4-track, I guess.
Well, I think, obviously meeting James, fate happens. And Mowax has gone down in legendary status because of who, signed Shadow Crush.
Yeah.
But, in the beginning, it was lumped in that trip-hop genre, Mowax trip hop, but it was more than that.
If anything, I'd say there was, I think James in the early days, I think would have felt he was kind of had at least one foot in acid jazz, which is not something anybody wants to admit to anymore. But that's a different story. But James, there's lots of it's easy to knock him, and it's easy to take the piss out of him because of going a bit off the rails and the kind of becoming a bit of a rock star and and all that kind of thing. But that the idea and what musicians always or artists will always say is, you don't want to be signed to a label that's bigger than the artists. But why not? Why not? I got an awful lot of attention, and I got an awful lot of opportunities because of Mo Wax, rather than because of the specifics of the records I was putting out. And James's drive and his dynamism was incredible. I mean, the case in point of, I'd go and hang out there and we'd go and chat and everything. And then he was doing a club, I think it was Tung Kung Fu, I can't remember, it doesn't matter, little club in Covent Garden. And I turned up there one evening with, and I can't remember, it was either a cassette or a DAT of a tune I'd just done. And I was in a booth because, that point it was, you always wanted to get in a booth and chat to, if you could, it was, and we knew each other from hanging out. And I said to him, listen, I've got a tune here. And he just went, let's put it on. And I want to say that he didn't even listen to it, but he must have done. I can't believe he would have played it without actually, but it would have been there and then in the booth, and he must have checked the beginning and gone, yeah, that's all right. And that was one of the tunes which was on my first 12 on my Wax. Now, to just have the slightly kind of neurodivergent kind of hyper focus to think, I'll just play this tune now because it sounds interesting in the middle of a club. It's fantastic. It's really fantastic. And I think there was that's what was special about Mo Wax, I suppose. And I'm grateful for that. It's obviously the explosion of Mo Wax came with Shadow and Crush and Uncle and all of that. But I'm very glad that I had my part in that to play. It was he never refused to put anything out. You know, he never, for all his, he had some, some odd quirks. There was a period where he was so obsessed by Sun Ra. He was absolutely obsessed by Sun Ra, but he was obsessed by his idea of what Sun Ra was. And I think his idea of what Sun Ra was kind of somebody sampling Sun Ra, and and you'd play him something and he goes, yeah, maybe it could be a bit more Sun Ra. And I wanted to just record some Sun Ra, some like Ellington-esque big band with choral singing, and play it to him, because you guarantee he would have said, oh, but it's not really Sun Ra, is it? It's like, but with that enthusiasm, he was greedy. He wanted everything, and that's great as an artist on a label. That's what you want. You want someone saying, "Give me more, give me more."
It's an amazing label, like the Funk Mob.
Yeah,
blew me away.
Yeah.
When you thought you'd have the label down, then something like the Funk Mob.
Yeah,
you're just like, what is this?
Yeah, well, the fact that he'd get a Richie Hawtin remix on a label like that is,
Yeah.
Well, the last 12 I did for him, which had an Autechre remix, that's still leaves me fizzing with pride and with like, what that happened to me? That's like, it's I can die happy, because of that. And now Autechre would not be a natural fit really for Mo Wax, if not the cliched view of Mo Wax anyway. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, Autechre, just I've seen them a few times live.
Yeah,
like, I mean, they're masters of their craft,
Yeah.
But I want to talk about like DJ Crush as well, because how he used the turntables as an instrument. I remember he was one of the first ones to take the elastic band and put it on the tone arm and do the bass lines.
Yeah.
So mesmerized by that. Now, for you, for DJing as well, did you use the turntable as an instrument?
I did, and the little bit that I did, I stole entirely from Crush. There was a Vestax which had a delay, and it had very like a transform button and something else, and Crush and we did a couple of tours together that were absolutely in my musical, like my memories of musical experiences are up there with some of my favorite times. I had a kind of manager of sorts in Japan. She was a friend of a friend, and she was not really kind of qualified or that good, but she was very forceful, and she had some connections that were probably less than savory, but they were good at getting bookings in clubs. And Crush and I did a tour together of these kind of pretty kind of murky clubs, and it was during a typhoon season in Japan, and we were driving around in this battered 4x4 that my manager's friend was driving, and we were pretty much just left on our own, and Crush's English was almost non-existent, and my Japanese equally, and we spent a lot of days just with dead time hanging out, and it was fantastic. And he's such a lovely man, and when I bump into him now and again, not that often, but now and again, and it's still just fantastic to see him. And I was just soaking up everything he did, and I had none of the scratch techniques that he's got. I had very rudimentary scratch techniques, but I just watched and thought, this is incredible. And in fact, we did another tour that was him and Shadow and me, and we'd each do a set, and then we'd do a thing where they each had a deck and I had a little synth, and we'd jam. And that, again, I was just watching them. I'd be playing, but just be watching them the whole time, thinking, is there some fraction of this that I can kind of try and make mine? And so yeah, Crush's musicality is incredible, and I took a tiny bit of it and tried to put it into my sets, and that would have been when I was still playing primarily kind of slightly shoegazy, slow beats, and what you'd kind of expect from a Mo Wax thing. But there was a change probably around 1994, I guess, when I kind of suddenly discovered that if you mixed house tunes, that all the women in the club started dancing, and the guys with goatee beards and Swifty t-shirts would glare at you and go back to the bar instead of shuffling around near the decks. But it felt a lot like there was more point to it. It felt like a more sort of kind of satisfying club night when people actually danced, you know.
Yeah, my mate booked DJ Shadow here at a rave.
Right.
It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, not the music, but just Shadow went after. I think he went after a trance DJ.
Right.
You know, the music stopped, and he got on the microphone. He goes, "I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here, but I hope to give you the best hour and a half of your life." And it was great to see, you know, these little candy ravers within half an hour just getting down, you know,
Yeah.
just getting down to him. And it
Brilliant.
was so great because you saw the smile on his face.
Yeah.
He was loving it.
Oh, that's a great testament to the fact that, you know, people generally aren't too tribal, you know, in terms of if it's good and it's got some emotional thing, and he's, you know, Shadow is, God, you know, beyond sincere in terms of what he produces and delivers. So, you know, it would be odd if at least most of those people wouldn't feel like, okay, there's something special going on here. I don't know. There was a band that I did for a while with Rob from Galliano called Earl Zinger, and it was a bit like a kind of. It was brilliant. It was quite cabaret. It was kind of slightly comedy. Sean Lee was in it, and Ski from K Creative as well, and we'd all swap instruments, and it was it was incredibly loose. It was almost like it was falling apart, but we all knew what we were doing. So it was, and Rob is so charismatic and everyone wants to root for Rob. I mean, it's just brilliant. But somewhere along the way we got booked to headline a trance festival in the mountains somewhere like Switzerland or something. And it was another one of those, like you were just saying, we were like, what on earth are we doing here? This is like a lo-fi, like we used to drink a lot and we used to get people to bring us drinks, and we used to play small club venues and things, and it started, and it was not going particularly well. They weren't that responsive, and Rob didn't do a kind of, I'm not sure what we're doing here, and then we were on our second or third song, and Rob suddenly went, stop. And we all stopped. And he'd noticed a moth that had got trapped in a bit of light near the monitor at his feet. And he bent down and he picked up this moth, and he was like, and it flew up this spotlight. And he said something ridiculous, like, you know, it's a moth moment or something. And the whole place just went berserk. And after that, they loved it. Whatever we did, they loved it. And it was just that connection, I guess, what I'm talking about. It was just like, you know, he didn't try and say, like, let's play it a bit more trancey, or it's just like he was just being as much him as he could be. And then and that's all you can hope for, really, in terms of getting a response.
All the good drugs kicked in.
That's probably fairly significant. But listen, use what you can. You know, if it's you know, I'll take applause from a drug-addled audience anytime.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, your ears open up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Take what you can. I do want to talk about like the Virgin. You know, you got signed to Virgin, which again, you know, it's one of those, Simon, that you've got to be very happy. You know, it opens another door. You know, more money's kind of coming in, and then you also get the big downfall as well from being dropped.
Yeah.
You know, you get the high, then the massive low. But I also think it's a learning curve. It must have been for you.
It massively was a learning curve. I think the main thing I learned was, when you get signed by somebody expecting you to deliver the next Daft Punk album, don't deliver an ambient excursion into the fringes of experimental music. Because, to be fair, Dave Boyd, who was the A&R there, he loved it, but, you know, it was never going to be a long career at a label like that, doing things like that. And I don't think I could say that I purposefully made it obscure, but it was just, as you say, I got a huge budget, and I thought, I can really try things now. I can rent in a whole set of cymbals. I can go to decent studios. And I didn't think, and this is folly of youth, I suppose. I didn't think, what would a major actually want from me here? And I, a bit like Shadow on stage, I thought, I'm going to give you the best that I can at that time. And as you say, the good and the bad, I got for the time and for me and for that kind of money, for that kind of music, I got a huge advance, and it was incredible. And I got, I kind of charted. I was in the top 100, which has got I'm sure it's got more to do with just the fact that a major label can pressurize enough people in the right places to somehow shift the units. I don't know, but and I got noticed a bit, probably not that much, probably not as much as a Mo Wax record would have done then, but getting dropped felt horrible. But on the other hand, I would never have recouped that advance making the records that I was making. I would probably still owe it to them now. And getting dropped just meant, oh, what, I get to keep that money. That's like, okay, so now I can fund doing what I want to do anyway. But yeah, it did. Obviously, look, you never feel good about someone saying we don't want you anymore. But there was a bit of politics as well. I think they thought they were poaching me from Mo Wax, and that they were going to be getting a lot more of a pull from the Mo Wax connection, and they probably didn't realize that I was one of the more obscure people on Mo Wax, and that maybe that didn't work so much. I was working very, very, very closely with Nana Cherry at that time, and that association was very, that was quite instrumental in getting me through the door at Virgin. It was really Nana's kind of production company that I think had said, you should listen to this kid. It's, and they were having issues with Nana as well. So I was I think I was slightly caught up in that a little bit as well. But again, like if that happened now, being old, I would probably worry more. But then it was just another kind of, what's next? Doesn't really matter. Great, that was fun. What's next? I remember being at I crashed the press launch for the Spice Girls album that was in the Virgin offices. And I remember one of the bigwigs holding up a kind of glass of champagne or whatever it would have been, saying, this is a great day for Virgin having the Spice Girls. And I was pissed at the back going, it's a terrible day for music. And, but what was I thinking? I was at Virgin. Of course, do they want the Spice Girls, or do they want a chin stroking electronic musician? Let's think about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the music industry is all about money, isn't it? And
Yeah.
the artist.
Yeah. And there's room for both, there's room for both. You can't, I wouldn't want a world without the Spice Girls.
I would. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just not into like made up. Like
no, you're right. Confected, but but there has to be pop music. There has to be throwaway music. There has to be silly music. There has to be, fun. It has to be fun. I very rarely make fun music, do I? It's all dark and brooding and
cinematic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I love and many people love. Yeah, you are right. There's space in this world for different kinds of music, whether we like it or not. Country music, like the pop. I just can't do the pop country. I like some of the old country music. Like some Willie.
I'm saving two things. I'm saving for old age: country music and smack. And I think they go well together as well. When you're feeling really cold, everything hurts, you don't want anything too jarring. Just a little bit of heroin, a little bit of country music. It's sorted. Don't have to worry about the heating bills,
Yeah, just get a nice little rocking chair.
Exactly. A nodding chair.
Yeah, nodding rocking chair. Yeah, it'd be good. Now, for you again as an artist. Because I know you produce a lot of other, artists yourself. As Palmskin Productions, obviously you make the music you make, and that doesn't make record companies their money, obviously. So you go down, producing others. How does that? I mean, when you've done like Nana Cherry, obviously REM, Depeche Mode, a plethora of others. How do you bring your style into them? Do you have like a sit down with the band, with the artist? And
No, I mean, well, rarely. I mean, the really, the big name stuff, if you like, that all came about because I was working really closely with Johnny Dollar, who was a very, very close friend and who died about 14, 15 years ago. And he and I had met working with Nana. And then things had gone, people were going their separate ways out of the experience of working with her at that time. And John and I kind of naturally drifted kind of together. And so I started off mostly programming for and with him. And then we started co-producing together. And quite often it would be more in the way of like remixing, like the Depeche Mode thing, to clarify, was this is one of these things that labels kind of PR things and things. We were doing a remix and I did some programming on it. And in fact, around about that time, quite a lot of stuff that John and I did, the band would go, I'm not sure what you're doing here, because we would pull it apart in quite strange ways. The REM thing was really fantastic, and it kind of answers your question, because they'd used an REM track for a what's his name, Danny Boyle film, and they wanted a new version, and so they sent us the multi-tracks, and we did this weird kind of ambient cinematic kind of thing. And then the band heard it, and Michael said, I'd like to revocal. I don't do this as a remix. We'll do this. You can be producing the band. And so we met him on that regard, and obviously he liked it because he wouldn't have wanted to do it otherwise. Pulp, we did a version for, and Jarvis came in and hated what we'd done to the structure of the song, and we had to wrangle with him a bit. I mean, we had some funny experiences. We produced this Utti Lemper track. This is a bizarre pitch. This was for a Jean-Claude Van Damme film, a period films about the Foreign Legion, and they got Utti Lemper to record a version of Edith Piaf's Mon Légionnaire, but they wanted a trip-hop version. And I know, right? And we were recording it, and we knew we had the vocal. We had the vocal already, but Utti Lemper was like being a perfectionist, and we couldn't get her out of the studio. And John and I would do this thing where we'd play good cop, bad cop, and it was my day to be bad cop. And I remember saying to her, okay, so can you try it? Can you sing it in like a pantomime kind of German English accent? Jussi Lemper is German, because at the moment it sounds like you're kind of trying to sound American. And she was like, trying to sound American? I'm not trying to sound American. And about 2 takes later, she goes, I think we have this, and left. So it was not necessarily the most people-pleasing approach to production always. But yeah, I'm thinking about when we produced some stuff for Youssou N'Dour, and I think he was expecting us to be, John knew Youssou from doing 7 Seconds, and John's approach was always like, there's no point playing the bigwig high-end producer, which he so easily could have done because he was. But he didn't like to spend bands' money unnecessarily. He didn't like to leave home unnecessarily. So we would quite often work in the back room of his terraced house in Kensal Rise, because there's no point spending money on demoing and developing until you know what you're doing. And Youssou came, and Youssou did like a bit of bling, and he liked it a bit kind of, he wanted it to be a bit more posh. And I think he was a bit thrown by that. And at some point in the album process, he went off to record a track with Wycliffe in New York. And from what I heard from him afterwards was he got picked up by a limo and he got taken to the studio and everything. And Wycliffe said, right, what have you got? And he said, well, I'm here. What have you got? And Wycliffe said, well, nothing. I've got what are you gonna? And they blew the rest of the album's budget on that weekend, trying to come up with something. I think there was a track on the album. I don't know. And I think I would, I still hold to that approach. There's no point. Kind of. Why would you go into the studio and spend 700 quid a day, even in the days when you could do that? I mean, nowadays people don't expect to pay for production. Really, it's quite odd. They just think you're just going to do that for free. If you've got your laptop and you've got a few plugins and away you go. I can't remember what you asked now.
No, it's basically just saying like the difference between making your own music and in other people's, and the ideas that you can bounce off each other.
I mean, I definitely used to approach production a bit like remixes, which was I would try and make it as different to what was expected, which again is not, I think it's not a principle to be proud of, because obviously there are some people who there's a reason why they sound the way they sound. In general, I find it easier, much easier producing other people than doing my own stuff. You have none of the agony of worrying about, the material, in a sense, because it's like you sometimes, it depends. Some jobs you get involved a bit in rewriting, or you want to change things a bit. But I generally like just saying, what are you doing? What's your thing, and what can I do to make that work the best it can? I think one of my, I was going to say favorite, but it was also really hair pulling. I produced a folk album for a singer called Jackie Oates, who's a phenomenal folk singer. And we did it all in her kitchen over a period of a couple of years. And one of the reasons I got asked to do it was I was working with her anyway in a band. And also she had a young child, and she knew that I had my how old was my daughter then? 6 or something, I don't know. And so half the time we'd be set up in the kitchen. I'd have Jackie's baby on my shoulder. We'd have mics around the room, and then we'd press record, and we'd record. And it was just, for me, there's no electronics on the whole album. It's literally, you're just recording fiddles, accordions, vocals, the upright piano, and it was just whatever sound got made in that room. And it didn't help that now and again Jackie would say, "Oh, I've got the guy from Anglia Windows coming in this afternoon. Is that a problem?" And there'd be like smashing of a bay window being taken out, or the neighbour would be trimming the fence, or you can hear an ice cream van going by in one song and stuff like that. But as a producer, that was everything that was fascinating to me. It stretched me because I couldn't cheat with electronics. I had to really learn like how to engineer properly, like super quick, because there was no, you just had to make it sound beautiful. So I loved doing that as a producer. I think I probably, if somebody said, I've got a kind of ambient electronic band I want you to produce, I don't know. I mean, yes, but that's just, you've got that covered. Why would I? What can I bring to that? I mean, I could, of course, but it's lovely being asked to do something. Okay, I'm going to learn so much from this.
Well, I think it takes you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, and stops you worrying about you as well. It's like, it's like I say, when I'm doing my own stuff, every single note I play is like, well, that's shit. Oh, that's ruined that idea. And the whole thing is just, you have a good idea, and then the rest is just try not to ruin it too much by the time you get to the end. But when it's someone else's, it's like, it's great. I don't have to worry about that. I just have to make it sound like it works, Are
you a perfectionist?
Less and less. I think I'm more of an egotist. I just worry about sounding rubbish and that people are going to think it's no good. I know when something's right in my head, and I couldn't possibly explain when that is. And I was talking about this with my daughter a while back. So she suffers from something called misophonia, which is certain sounds trigger anxiety and anger and upset in her. So for instance, eating sounds, so she'll generally wear ear defenders or earplugs during meals, or a lot of loud things which you might expect, but sounds of breathing, and generally the sounds of me being around her. She says it's misophonia. Maybe she just can't stand me. But I was wondering if there's a positive kind of misophonia. I suppose it's a bit like this, the whole what's it called, ASMR thing, which is I'm not a perfectionist, but there's a point at which a sound is right. And that's not about it being in tune. That's not about, it's just, well, there's a shape to it. And I could compromise it in terms of I could ignore it and I can settle for something that isn't right, but I will always hear that. And so I guess in terms of that perfectionism, it's getting to a point where like, oh yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. That sounds right. And I'm wondering if that is part of another kind of, an aspect of neurodivergent behavior that I suppose it is, because it's your brain wired a certain way to hear things a certain way.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about Swarm in July.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Such a beautiful album.
Oh, thank you.
And to me, that's modern day classical. And you throw in The Sword Will Die. I mean,
Yeah.
Because most of it is to me very, very classically like produced, and then all of a sudden you have that song, and then halfway through the beat comes in. Literally, you're like, my mind was blown, because I was settled in to listening to how beautiful it was, and
right.
you just like took your like slapped me. Like it's an incredible track. The whole album's incredible, but that stands out just because I'm a beat person. I love my beats.
Right.
And it just took me by surprise, and it's so heavy.
I think it's born out of a fear of being predictable and familiar. It's a fear of like, it's a fear of belonging. I think it's a fear of like, exactly you say, I don't want someone to settle down and think, oh, this sounds like, it could be like a so-so version of an Erased Tapes track, or because then you get something out of nowhere. And it's that it's the contrast, it's the friction and the grind and the break that I think is interesting. But maybe it's also insecurity. I mean, I need to shake it up, because I'm not too. If I just did the one thing that settled into a nice, comfortable genre, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't work so well. I don't know, maybe I wouldn't be accepted. That's a different matter. I don't know. I was just thinking about, in terms of, talking about labels and talking about Virgin and things like that. I've never really pursued a path where, I've made a type of music, and I've made the same music over and over and over again. And I'm not saying that's, in a way, I'm not proud of that, because, people with a very recognizable brand, I hate to use that word, but people, Shadow, I mean, the most creative people, the most incredible people, I'm not saying this in any derogatory way, but people with a recognizable brand, the label knows what to do with them. The shop knows where to stock them. The people know where to look to listen to them. And but it does really well. I possibly have shot myself in the foot over the years by kind of willfully not really kind of following that path. But it's what interests me at the time. It's what, it's and again, I suppose even within that track, it's a kind of restlessness, in that I remember getting to a certain point with that piano motif and kind of just knowing, okay, this has to go into something a little bit kind of, hammering,
Well, I mean, you listen to that, then you go to your Trickle Up EP,
and
it's like funky house.
Yeah.
But that's what I love about your productions, though, because I think you don't want to be pigeonholed as an artist.
Well, or maybe you do, though. Maybe you do want to be pigeonholed, because then you make there's somewhere, there's a home for you then.
Yeah, but I mean, like for me, I love going down the rabbit hole. That's the whole beauty of music, is finding stuff that you never expected. And obviously, I can go to a record shop and go through the M's. It's Massive Attack. I know what I'm getting. It's trip hop. It's hip hop. It's political. But with you, you've got your house, you've got your ambient, you've got your trip hop, you've got your like lo-fi stuff, And I think that's the best that you can do, because you know, I love my Sashas, I love my John Digweed.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to change. That's progressive house. That's, you know, melodic techno, whatever you want to call it. Whatever comes up with genre wise, you know.
Yeah.
But for me, your music changes every album.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's, you know, I mean, you can't be any of those people without still loving what you do and being interested in it and wanting to do it. I don't believe any of the, you know, anyone makes good music cynically, really. I just don't think it happens. Maybe you can get away with it to some extent. So I kind of wish, like, I think about Hard Floor. I wish I was Hard Floor. I so wish I was Hard Floor. I wish I was still that interested in a 909 and a 303 and a 707. I wish. I mean, I adore Hard Floor. I'm obsessed by them. I think they're amazing. And at the moment, I'm going through quite an acid phase. That's really, everything that's interesting me involves some form of acid noise. But, you know, if I made that same sound, I wouldn't be interested, and then it wouldn't be good, because but yeah, I'd love to be just there all the time, you know.
Do you have any upcoming releases?
Yeah, no, I've got no scheduled releases. I'm in the middle of a project that's taking a long time, and probably will take a long time as well. I'm working with a singer called Rihanna Connolly, who is a phenomenal singer. She's in a band called The Breath with a guy from a cinematic orchestra, and she's in her own band called Honey Feet, which is a kind of really raucous kind of funk kind of thing. But she also sings insanely beautiful Gaelic music and some folk music. And I met her when, for our sins, if we're going to get into disclosure, we were both playing in the Afro-Celt sound system, and became very, very close friends. But she lives in Manchester and is insanely, she's one of these people who do, you know, a few gigs a night every night, but she also does things like she arranges choirs and singing groups for migrants and asylum seekers, and she has a thing she calls sex workers karaoke, where she looks after, she's good people, and she's always busy, and she never does her homework for me. So we've done 2 or 3 tracks, and it's taken nearly a year. And in fact, I'm going up to Manchester next week for a week to try and crowbar some more stuff out of her. But I'm really, you know, everyone says this about new stuff, but I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be, I'm going to really like it. You know, I don't want to be the old guy boring on about the music industry, but, you know, one of the tracks from the album before I saw him in July, I remember getting a call from True Thoughts, and they said, "Oh, you've had 1.5 million plays on Spotify," and I was like, "That's amazing! Is it amazing?" I guess it's amazing. Is it good? And they said, "Yeah, that's, you know, that's good numbers. 500 quid in the royalty statement, you know." And so, you know, I'm excited that I'm still excited about making my music. What's the significance of it now? I don't know. Good to still be, it's good to still be making it, I suppose. Good to still wanting making it, and hopefully people will want to hear it, you know. I guess it's scratching an itch, which helps.
Yeah, I mean, the music industry's changed, obviously, with social media. You know, it's shorter attention span, and like you said, I don't like that word brand. It's cringy for me, you know, because it's more about the image than it is the music, and that's sad. That's sad to the point that we've gotten to that point where, you know, you've got to be this like good-looking individual, you know, who's very photogenic.
Yeah, and not even, you know, I mean, yes, but I would say maybe not in club culture. Definitely not in club culture, looking at the various figures. But there's always been people who always liked a handsome front person or a good-looking singer or whatever. But I think the damage of the social media thing is. So the other day we were talking about mobile phones to our daughter who's 12, and she doesn't want one particularly, and she's obviously she does increasingly there are things that happen online and things like that. And Rosie, my missus, showed her. We were talking about dance music and something. Anyway, she wanted to show her something happening in Ibiza, and so she went online to look at some YouTube stuff, and Rosie kept going, "Oh no, not that," and Connie was like, "What? Why? What's wrong?" And Rosie went, "Oh, this isn't what I want to show you." And she said, "Well, show me." And there's nobody dancing. I know this is not. It's another soapbox thing, but it's literally nobody dancing. Everyone with their phone, And then Rosie went, "Wait a minute," and went back and found something from the 90s. Might have been Pasha or something. I don't know what it was. And, people pulling ugly faces, tops off, whole place losing it. And Connie was like, "Yeah, I really don't want a mobile phone because those people are having fun. That's what it is." And that's what I think is the shame of the social media thing. That the attention span thing is, and it's terrifying. I was DJing at Glastonbury a few weeks ago. It was going very well, so it's great. And then I looked down, and along the front was this group of, I don't know, about 18 or something, and they were all on their phones. They were dancing, but they were all on their phones, and I was terrified because I was like, if I lose them, I will lose them really fast, and they will be chatting to their mates wherever they'll be, and then that will spread, and I didn't lose them, and that was fine, and in fact they moved on, so I probably did lose them, but whatever, they got out of the way. But it was that kind of fear of the attention span thing. My friend Jamie, who runs Free Range Records, Jimpster, he had a gig in Ibiza. I think he was playing before Black Coffee, and a relatively big deal for Jamie. It was like, I can't remember the club name, it was about 5,000 capacity kind of thing. And he said it went great. He said no one was dancing, but I wasn't expecting them to. They were all filming. And again, when you spent, 200 quid on a ticket and drinks are like €25, damn right you want to record it to show your friends, because it's become part of a kind of aspirational lifestyle. It's not just, but he was saying that, and he generally plays, the deeper end of house. He was like, "Oh, I wish I'd done more edits. Because, you need to be doing something every 8 bars, or maybe push it to 16, but you really need to be doing something, And again, that, the knobs in the wind tunnel thing of like, because I don't know.
But that's sad in itself for Jamie to actually go, "I didn't expect anybody to dance anyway."
Yeah.
You're a house music legend. I mean,
I know.
It should be Black Coffee opening up for.
Yeah. Well, in a just world, yeah.
I mean, that's just me, but we've come to a point where DJs don't expect people to dance, and I mean, it's in the word dance music.
It's a hint.
Yeah. Well, I know you probably need to go now. Do you want to do a quick football?
It won't be quick. And in fact, I was going to say you should interview Jamie as well, because he has absolutely no interest in football either, and knows nothing about it.
Well, I was going to ask you about Jamie afterwards, but
sure. Yeah. No, it was only so I did smile a couple of days ago because a couple of weeks ago I was DJing with Bill Brewster at a little festival, and I know that he's a Grimsby fan, and then I saw on a news feed that Grimsby had humiliated, is it Man United or Man City? I don't know which it was.
United, they beat them.
Yeah, and it brought a smile to my face, and only because I wanted to. What am I trying to say? Football just seems so alienated from local clubs, a community, an opportunity for kids to be doing something, and football doesn't seem to be that. And that's what I would have asked you about is what the hell has happened, because it strikes me as being an entirely alien form for people to kind of dip their toe into and buy a second's worth of experience of. But
Well, it's money that's ruining
yeah,
all the greed. You know, it's kind of pricing out the locals to go to a match. It's kind of like the club world as well. You know,
well, yeah,
charging extravagant fees to go to see a DJ that you're not going to dance to, and all you're going to do is get your phone out. It's the same at football matches. You know, you
yeah,
look around and there's people with their phones out, and it's like you're at a football match that you've paid this much money for, and you've probably flown there,
yeah.
and it just boggles the
I mean,
mind.
there's a thread, isn't there? There's a common thread, which also, closing down of all the music venues and touring turning into you do four nights in the UK, but you do a week there. And if people want to come and see you, they have to get an extortionate train ticket, or they have to fly, or they have to. Again, it's an erosion of local of what's the word? Not localness, but let's call it that. It's like it's somebody. Raymond Williams, somebody who talked about capital burns off the nuance in the culture, and the footballers. I can understand why they're getting paid so much, because there's a potential enormous revenue that someone's getting. So why shouldn't they be a part of that? But instead of thinking, well, wait a minute, let's address that enormous revenue and spread that out a bit more. A bit like music as well. All these tickets, all the money, the DJ fees, and yet musicians are expected to sell their stuff for points of a penny a unit. It's
Well, I mean, Richie Houghton was trying to do that thing where the tracks he was playing would go, the money would go to the artist. Because I mean, that's why I love Bandcamp, because most of the money goes to the artist. You make the damn music, you should get paid for it. I mean, we can get a whole another episode about Spotify.
Sure. Yeah.
Again, like you said, a 250,000 downloads or whatever, and you get
a few £100, if that.
That's not right.
250,000. No, you don't even get. You probably get about under 100 if you've got a split with a label.
Yeah, it's just not right. But talking about that, if you want to hear Simon's music, you can go to palmskinproductions.bandcamp.com. He has amazing music on there. Trust me, I'm a music lover, and you will absolutely love it.
Thank
Simon,
you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
It has indeed. Yeah.
Like I always say, an hour goes by quickly when you talk about things that you're passionate about and that you love.
Yeah, well, I hope it's not just sound like two old men talking serial numbers to whoever's listening. I'd like to think there's something there, but you never know. It's nice talking to you anyway.
Yeah, it's the same here, mate. I love doing these episodes for myself, because I get to know the artists that I really like more. But it just seems like everyone seems to be liking the episodes. So
Brilliant.
That's I don't care whether it's one person listening or 1,000. As long as
that's been my approach to making music, right?
That's how it should be. To be honest, if one person messages you and says, I really enjoy your music, I really enjoy your podcast, that's enough for me.
So quite a long time ago. In fact, early days of working on A Swarm in July, some of which started nearly a decade ago, some of those ideas. I was round at Ski, who's in K Creative and Galliano again, and he does his own stuff, which is great, Ski Oakenfall. I was at a barbecue at his house, and I had a couple of nearly mixes, and I really wanted to play them to Ski because he's got amazing ears and he's an amazing musician, and I just wanted to know what he thought. But it was dragging on and people weren't going. And eventually there was just one guy left, who's this guy called Gunter, who was his neighbor. And I hate playing stuff. It's fine to play it to a friend who's a musician and everything, but I don't want to put it on in a room full of people and do you want to hear my new tune? Sod that. But eventually I was like, okay, well, Gunter's not going home, so I'm gonna play it. So I started playing it, and he goes, I really like this. What is this? And I said, "Oh, thanks. It's music. It's music I'm making." And he goes, "I really like this. If I heard this, I would pay 79p for this." And that's that's your one person. I guess that's as good as you. That's as good as it gets.
It makes you feel good. So, but yeah, I want to say thank you again. Please, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, put your notifications on. I always leave the episode saying, we live in a crazy world, so please just take care of one another, have respect for one another, tell your family and your mates you love them. And until next time, take care, be safe, and we'll see you.